This is Father Patrick Briscoe.
And this is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
Welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Father Bonaventure.
Father Patrick, how are you?
I'm great. Here we are. You know, we are ready to talk about today one of your favorite topics.
Yes.
To both my surprise and delight. But before we get into that, how has your Lent been this year?
Been okay. Not the best in a way, but that's what happens when you're finishing a doctorate and all the final reviews go in and also job applications, this sort of stuff. So it's been busy with things, but the nice...
Wait, do you mean you have to work when you're religious?
That's exactly right. Yeah, or at least you have to certify yourself so that you could work. So it's been busy, not as busy as yours, I'm sure. But the good part about Holy Week is that whether you arrived well prepared or ill prepared, you're all there.
That's
and
right.
You're caught on it. It's a bit like, I think, the Camino. You can start in France, or you can start, a week out or something, and everyone on that last leg gets the medal or the shell or whatever.
You come right through to Easter. Easter doesn't wait for you to be ready.
That's right.
Easter comes.
The Holy Week liturgies will naturally bring you along to the right disposition, it seems like, to Holy Week and towards that. So I'm looking forward to that because I've been distracted otherwise.
Nice.
But how's your
excellent
your Lent been so far?
As you noticed, a lot of travel.
Yes.
Yeah, I've not been home in the house here much, which is both good and bad, right? Good because I enjoy being on the road and I enjoy the invitations and I enjoy the preaching that comes with that. Bad because it's all exhausting and I don't pray well when I travel and all of those things are just annoying. So,
yes.
I'm very happy to have arrived at Easter, right? And to have Lent behind me.
Yes, I think that's one of the learning part. So in college, when you have breaks, your freshman year, I think you bring a lot of books home with you because you think, I'm going to study. I remember bringing my big physics textbook home with me on October break or something, the short break, and you set it down in your room, and then you leave it, and then you pick it up when you go back to the school or something. And as you mature in the years of college, you take less and less home with you because you realize you're not going to be doing this. I think something similar happens with prayer outside of the convent or the monastery or the cloister, is that you initially, when you're traveling or something, you think, okay, I'm going to do the exact same kind of prayer. I'm going to have the same experience and the same attentiveness. But the longer you're in, the more you realize I'm just going to pray really horribly when I'm not in the monastery, not in the convent, when I'm not in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. If I'm traveling for a chaplaincy or something, and you're in a hotel room and you think, I'll do my 30-minute meditation here, and it's just going to be you sitting there and not getting much out of it, in my experience. And then the difference is that you become okay with it, and maybe later you get better at it. But initially I was very frustrated at that, and now I just realized it's just not going to be good prayer when I'm on the road. It's going to be prayer, but it's going to be minimal. That's
right. I'm going to do what I promised to do because I promised I would do it.
Yes.
It's almost like someone thought about religious life and knew what it could do for you.
Yes.
One person, though, how's this for a transition?
Yeah.
One person who received a lot in her prayer in religious life is Saint Faustina.
It's true. She did. Dear listeners and viewers, this will come as no surprise that I am a big Faustina fan, but I
think it will come as a surprise.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, she's a long stretch from Kant, for example.
And maybe therefore necessary. If I didn't have her, I don't know what kind of person I would be. Although you're a sort of devotee as well. I remember I have a Divine Mercy. My Divine Mercy image in my cell is from you, which you brought back from Poland when you were visiting a couple years ago. As a war correspondent. So I think it was, maybe it was something else.
It was the OG trip.
Yes, right. You've been to...
It was World Youth Day.
That's right.
From Bonaventure.
That's right. You've been to Poland a bunch of times. I've never been there. But yes, it's true. I have a devotion to St. Faustina. I tend to preach when I'm not in the house. I tend to preach, I think, the way Dominicans preach, except I quote Faustina instead of St. Thomas in general thing. So I think she's great. So, but it is a strange connection.
Now, you picked up devotion to her when we were novices, though. Why was that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll just go through. So, when I got to the novitiate, I realized that all of you had what I've referred to as spiritual girlfriends. And by that I mean it's just true that men and women are different, and that women, we should do an episode on female mystics at some point, women have an insight and a relationship with Christ that's different than men have a relationship, insight into Christ, and yet both are necessary. That's why both are essential for the church. And so it makes sense that those who are trying to delve deeper into the spiritual life have to tap into both those insights and both those dimensions, complementary dimensions sort of thing, the masculine and the feminine mystical genius, you could say. And when I got there, I had I didn't come bringing like a female mystic with me, really. And everyone else had Therese of Lisieux or Elizabeth of Trinity or Catherine of Siena, this sort of thing. And I needed someone, but I, in a sense, had someone because I grew up in Buffalo with in a Polish Catholic town. And so Faustina was around. Like when I was driving the car and listening at 3 p.m., I would hear the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And I had first found her just by happenstance in a Barnes & Noble bookstore when I wasn't even Catholic, just seeing the diary on the end cap, as they're called, on the end of the religious section thing. And it just drew me in. There's something about it. I think because I'm colorblind, the red, white, and black are the colors that I see well together. So I think that's probably what drew me into this sort of thing. But I met her back in Buffalo, and I think she met me, really. So that started a relationship, even as a Protestant, although I wasn't that interested in... I remember walking over to the book when I first saw it and picking it up and going, ooh, Catholic nun. No, I'm a Calvinist, not going to do that sort of thing. And then I saw the same book when I was working at Barnes & Noble later after I'd converted. Same end cap. And I saw the book. And I said, oh, I picked it up and I thought, oh, well, I'm Catholic now. But I was open to that. Not really. A nun, not going to do it. So it was when I got to novitiate and again found out that this female mystic kind of sensibilities, I learned a lot about Catholicism in the novitiate. So when I figured out I had to have one, it was just obvious that St. Faustina had found me. And at the exact same time, Father Gregory, I keep things in my pocket, so let me get it out. Yes. Father Gregory gave me a holy card with a relic, third-class relic of her, with a prayer on it. And so I have kept this in my pocket, and I've prayed every morning to her for intercession to make me a good and holy Dominican priest. It was a good and holy Dominican brother first, but now it's a good and holy Dominican priest. So, yeah, we go way back, we could say.
St. Faustina is a bit of a surprise, I think, because of the spiritual impact she had in the church. Mm-hmm. Like, she's someone that you don't expect, right? Like, your relationship with her is surprising, but also, how is it that she has, such an extraordinary influence in the church, right? Like she was not. It's not as if she was popular in her time.
Well known, that kind of stuff.
She wasn't known. Mm-mm. She didn't do something that really contributed to the life of the church in a very visible way. I mean, her life was extraordinarily hidden, it seems to me,
yes,
as one of these sisters of Our Lady of Mercy. So it was a very simple life, a life dedicated to the core tenets of religious life. Even today, the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy live a strict, you could say, religious life, I think. Mm-hmm. It's a very traditional religious life, so it's filled with the observances that are simple. So the life is demanding in that way. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't have allowed for lots of gallivanting.
Yeah, evangelization or the kind of things you'd think that would get the message out there, because it's not that old, really. This isn't like an old devotion. This is something, she was born in 1905. And then entered in 1926, received the first revelations of Divine Mercy in 1931. The image was painted in 1934, and then she died. Faustina died on October 5th, 1938. So she lived 33 years.
The first image or the second image?
This was the first image. There's lots of funny stories about that. It's the one that most people probably have not seen. You're probably used to seeing the second one, because that's the one that was painted later. And was the first one that was venerated publicly outside of Sopoćko's Venerable Michał Sopoćko was the priest who was her main confessor and really directed her. And he had the first one. In fact, it was kind of painted off him, actually. He modeled for it, if I remember this correctly. But Father Andretz, the Jesuit, brought out the other one and venerated that one publicly. And so that was the image that we tend to associate with divine mercy, the other image. But Christ is very clear. Faustina actually didn't like the first image. She was just really disappointed in it. And Christ says it's not the paint strokes, the brush strokes that are going to give people the devotion. It's the graces that matter. So that's where the image, as long as it has certain features to it, and especially the Jesus, I trust in you, Jesu ufam tobie, then that's where the graces come from, not any particular image of that. As long as it has all the elements to it, you could say.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this and maybe clarify some of the things we bandied about there.
Oh,
so
yeah.
St. Faustina, in her prayers, receiving locutions, right? Messages from Jesus.
Yeah.
Why does she write them down? How is it that she knows she's hearing his voice? What does she do about all of that?
Yes, well, it's her confessor that she's very. It's interesting. Faustina's Jesuit trained, you could say, or at least her confessors were generally Jesuits. The model is obedience. So if you read her diary, which you ought to, everyone ought to, I suppose, in ways, you get a strong sense about obedience to superiors. And that's very important to her spirituality, about knowing the will of God through the particular confessor that you confess to, your spiritual director, and your superiors, that the will of God is mediated through these very ordinary people in your lives. And so her confessor asks her to write these things down and to explicitly, he's very clear that explicitly underline the things that you are sure are from Jesus, and this sort of thing. And then he's looking at these notebooks and carrying them around and judging them and that sort of thing. So she has these visions again. It's Chair of St. Peter, February 22nd, 1931, I think, is the first kind of first revelation, you could say, where Jesus comes to her, and then she has this relationship. Mary comes in sometimes too, but throughout these 7 years, she's having these things, and she's taking him down, and also he's telling her things to do. What's nice about it is they're nothing particularly crazy. It's not like he's giving her new revelation about any particular thing. It's not new visions of heaven or hell and this sort of stuff. It's really a refreshing vision of what the church has taught about mercy and bringing out the combination of love and mercy and the necessity of these two, which of course in Polish turn out to have the same root. Miłosierdzie and miłosierdzia. Mercy and love have the same root, whereas in English, we don't see this. So but bringing out the relationship. It's very Polish devotion that way, you could say. She's reflecting and she's putting down things that are from Jesus, and then she's putting down her own things. The diary is filled with her own reflections, just her diary. Sometimes Jesus is saying things. Sometimes it's beautiful prayers from her. Sometimes it's her reflecting on events. Sometimes it's her talking about conferences. Sometimes it's her saying how her struggles are going, Lenten practices. The diary is a beautiful thing to have around because you can follow it if you want to know like what she's doing during Lent. You can just open it up and find out and get reflections from Lent or Trinity Sunday or Corpus Christi, that sort of thing. So this isn't like new revelation that everyone has to. It's her diary with these personal revelations that then you can step into and examine and see if they speak to you as well. I think that's my experience.
So can you speak to us a little bit about the symbolism of the image? Listeners are probably used to seeing the image around in confessionals, in on stickers that are on the back of Polish grandmothers' cars.
Yep.
Wherever you can find the image, you can find the image all over the place on the front of copies of the diary.
Yep. Yep.
For example.
Yeah. Although that's the older.
Over.
That's the first image on that. Diary. Yeah.
Oh, Vilnius.
Yeah.
So what are some of the significant parts of the image? Because there are many depictions of Christ. So why is Saint Faustina's received image of Jesus significant?
Yeah, I was taught by Sister Gaudia, who you can find on an episode on this, Father Joseph Anthony and I did one with her, how to read the image correctly in this way, and is to work from top to bottom. And you start off with the eyes, the merciful gaze of Jesus. So the merciful Jesus gazes at you. You're drawn in by these eyes, this sort of thing. And then as you work down, you notice he's got one hand in blessing. And if it's that, I think there's like a GIF or a GIF. I think it's a GIF. Where he's got the blessing hand on the move. So everyone's probably seen that. So there's a hand in blessing. Then there's the other hand is on the heart, opening up to reveal his heart, which then has two rays coming out from it, one pale or white, one red. And those represent, he says, the passion and baptism. So white for baptism, and red for the passion. And these are the means of salvation, this sort of thing. And then as you walk down, you notice at the foot, there is, of course, Jesu ufam tobie, Jesus, I trust you. I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you, which is the kind of motto he tells her. This is on, again, February 22nd of 1931. He appears in this way to her and says, inscribe this in the bottom. The Divine Mercy image itself has to have that inscription. And so you're moving from his face to whom you feel attracted to, but you feel not worthy. And then you realize he's coming towards you. He's also stepping forwards towards you with a blessing hand, and through baptism and the blood, the passion, and then you respond, not by doing anything, but saying, I trust in you. And that's a mantra, or kind of something you can say over and over again. It's like the Jesus prayer, I find.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it'll call forth the image, and then he has a sort of disposition towards graces.
Because of the rays, I mean, in one way, the image is an exceptionally traditional image, right? The rays showing the blood and water which flowed forth from the side of Christ, which the church fathers and every significant Christian theologian since has argued is the source of the wellspring of the sacraments, right?
Yes.
Taking us back to the passion of Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
But the Divine Mercy image is interesting because it's not the suffering Christ in that way, right? This isn't Jesus crucified. I mean, it looks to me like it's Jesus risen, right? But with all the evidence of the passion there,
all nail marks.
So it's important that it shows us that mercy is coming from the cross, but doesn't terminate in the cross, right? Leads to life with the resurrected Jesus. And I think you were getting at that theme, which I was surprised was such a critical part of the understanding of the sisters of Divine Mercy. That Divine Mercy is incomplete without the emphasis on trust. Trust is really at the core of this. So why is that? Mercy and trust seem different categories.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think mercy is the descending aspect. That's how God acts, is being merciful. So the famous, of course, God's greatest attribute, my greatest attribute is mercy. This is Diary 301. And so that he always acts towards us with mercy because of our sin, and we need not just love, but love in a particular determination, which is mercy. But our response is in trust. So our response is, of course, in love in return, but it's in the entrustment to him to do his work. Most importantly, because his mercy comes in strange ways. This is very important for Faustina. She's not having these images, these visions and revelations, and feeling great. She's actually living a life of tremendous suffering. She dies, of course, very young, and spends much of the diary is written in a sanitarium, in a hospital, in a bed. She's suffering. She's in great suffering, and there are these great moments in the diary where she hands that over. Where she says, she makes, and this is 1264, I think it's the number, the act of oblation. After she says, I feel lost, I feel desperate, I feel like I'm, but whether I live for a long time to ripe old age, be blessed. Whether I die young, be blessed. Whether I'm known, be blessed. Whether I'm misunderstood, be blessed. She has this entrusting, whatever your will is. Again, it's the trust is, you could say, the loving aspect of obedience, because we can obey out of just our will, because we have to, or what have you. But the obedience has to be a loving obedience. And I think trust is the best way to describe that. When you trust someone to lead you or to direct you or to do something, you're obeying them, but with a willing heart, you could say, as opposed to just obeying traffic laws. I don't trust in traffic laws or sort of things. I just obey them. I love obeying them. But I obey them. But trusting, when you trust a person, and the obedience becomes an act of love through that. I think that's my suspicion. You'd have to ask a sister of Our Lady of Mercy who would really know all this stuff. I'm a neophyte in this.
Now, Jesus said to Faustina that his mercy would be like a spark in Poland, right, that would spread throughout the world.
Sure.
I think it's fascinating the way the Lord was at work here, right? So Jesus presents this understanding of himself, presents this teaching on Divine Mercy in the 1930s in Poland, right? And then we have the horrific events of World War II, which follow, right? And
Yeah, she dies right
then
before.
in Poland, you know, a century, or not centuries, but decades that are just as difficult as the war era for the Polish people. Can you talk a little bit about the timing of all of this and how Divine Mercy has just been present, or how you've seen it in the 20th century?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen this stuff firsthand more than I have, since you've been over there a few times. But it is interesting that she dies right before World War II and in Poland's, the invasion of Poland by Germany, and which starts off a horrific experience for the 20th century. But through that mercy, through this this Polish commitment, this entrusting to him, even despite all of the persecutions first under the Nazis, but then under communism, of course, you have an all-star, John Paul II, of course, who is the one who reopens, because initially a faulty translation of her diary is given to Rome, and it's put on the index. So the devotion is banned because of some faulty translations. Interesting enough, and he's the one who, as a cardinal, I believe, is when he's a cardinal, re-examines, opens it up in the late 60s, I think, to have him look again, because he's very attentive to her and to the message of the mercy, because of coming through the struggles there in their country. And he's the one who beatifies, of course, and then canonizes her. So Pope St. John Paul II is the one who's driving mercy, and is the result, in a sense, of Poland's the blood of the martyrs that becomes the seed of the Polish Church for the 20th century and the 21st century, you could say. So that's the connection between the two of them. I mean, Dives et Misericordia is one of his early encyclicals. Is written with Faustina like looking over his shoulder. He says he feels very close to her when he's writing this sort of thing. So he's very much connected to this, and I think you've experienced Polish people. I assume Polish people, Faustina and John Paul II, two 20th century Catholic giants. I mean, for one country to produce those two people.
Right. I think this is one thing that's very relevant, right? People are often distressed at the things they're seeing in the church or the experience of our culture. And the reality is that in such times, God does the same thing he's always done, which is to raise up great saints. Yeah. Francis of Assisi and Dominic Guzman were saints in part because their age was such a disaster. Like the world needed Francis and the world needed Dominic in a way that raised up their great orders, in the same way that the world needed Faustina and needed Wojtyła in the 20th century to be raised up by them. So how did we get from this experience of Faustina, namely Jesus speaking to her, revealing the image, to Divine Mercy Sunday? Yeah. Because now we have a kind of particular observance and expression of this in the life of the church. Obviously, John Paul II has his hand in it. He died on Divine Mercy Sunday.
Yep. This is something that Jesus reveals early on to Faustina, that he wants a feast after Easter, the Sunday after Easter. Again, as you mentioned, this is a resurrected Christ who's coming from after the Passion and is coming to people in mercy with the marks of the Passion. And he wants a feast to celebrate his mercy that had happened at Easter, the Passion Tide, during the holy days of the Passion and the resurrection of Christ. A special feast that everyone can become rededicated to this. And there was, of course, this is in some ways, again, ever ancient, ever new. There was a kind of mercy devotion before. You could have Sacred Heart of Jesus discussion about this, Mary Alacoque. And there was even a Feast of Mercy kind of. So initially when he asked for this, some of the priests said, well, we've already got, there's this kind of mass. And it's like, no, he wants a real one. He wants the big deal. This has to be a real Sunday. So it took a while for that to come up, but of course JP2 institutes that, and as you say, passed away on the vigil, I think, of Divine Mercy Sunday, and now it's the second Sunday, so it's the first Sunday after Easter, and it's a great kind of, you could say, a reminder of the events of Easter. It's kind of like a recap, and that is now applied to us, because Easter, you get caught up, I think in Easter. And the Passion, of course, Good Friday and Holy Saturday and Easter, you're focused on Christ. And then Easter week, you're hearing readings from, the early resurrection experiences, still in Christ. And then Easter, the Divine Mercy Sunday is nice because it's a turn, like, right, he didn't just do that for a show for himself. Like, hey, you want to, tell me Christ's son didn't go to the Father. Like, I bet I could do this. Holy Spirit, help me out. The Passion and the resurrection are because of his love for us. And so it's fitting to turn now on Divine Mercy Sunday to realize all these things we've been celebrating are because we needed it, because we're sinners, and because he has a great love and desires us. This is the other thing about the diary, which is beautiful, is when Christ is talking, he's not giving new revelations all the time. He's saying how much he desires souls. He thirsts for souls, is his language. He loves people. He loves sinners. And the only thing that's keeping them from turning to him is them.
One thing I've been thinking about recently, Father Bonaventure, is that in our world, we talk about divine mercy. We say the church is merciful. We tell the story of St. Faustina. And it's pretty broadly accepted. People have experienced mercy in the confessional, and they're aware and excited about this. But in our age, it seems to me there are a lot of people whose gut word for the church, that their main impression of the church is not merciful. You ask people what do they think of the Catholic Church, and the word they say is not mercy. And they say lots of other dark words.
Yeah.
So how do you think divine mercy, or how can our expression of divine mercy, as understood by St. Faustina, help us to address this question of our day, which is that people don't think of the church as merciful or as a teacher. They think of the church as oppressive and restrictive.
Yeah, I think the key, of course, is going to be the Christocentric, the Christ-centeredness of this sort of thing. You could think, the church, if it wants to be more merciful or be received as more merciful, it should be more merciful and should be doing acts of mercy. And yes. But acts of mercy without the merciful Jesus aren't merciful. They're just acts. And so the divine mercy focuses on, yes, God's mercy and his love, but it is a concrete, Christocentric, Christ from the cross love. It's blood and water pouring from his side, which was suffering, and it involves our trust. That's, I think, the image. It's all tied in the image here, that the church is merciful, but you're going to have to trust. You see, if it was just obviously merciful, if mercy always looked like great things and everything always worked out for us, and there was no suffering and no one saying you oughtn't to do that or that sort of thing, there'd be no need for trust. I don't need to trust you if I know where you're going and what I'm doing, and I want to do that. I don't need to take you. This doesn't sound like a good idea, Father Patrick, but I'll trust you on it. That kind of handing yourself over to someone is the element of mercy, that the divine mercy image, and that Faustina wants to remind us about, that yes, the church is merciful, but you might have to trust a little bit to get that, to make sense of it. That you might not make sense initially what's happening in your particular situation or in the world even, but that you trust because you see him. Again, look at his face, look at the gaze, look at the marks in his hands, and you say, if he's done this, I can trust that. And it has to be true for us in the religious life and us in the hierarchy too. We have to realize that we need to trust him in what he wants us to do and not what we want to do. So it's a matter of being obedient through loving trust. But it's a good reminder that mercy has a face and a shape and an image. And it's responded with in trust and not just some reception of good things necessarily.
Do you have time for one more?
Sure, we've got a minute.
Perfect. What is your favorite quote from the diary?
I love the favorite. I'll give you a favorite story of the diary because it's a quote I can memorize the whole thing. But I think it's 964. Faustina is she's sick, and so she can't do major penances. She says, Jesus, I want you to convert and save one soul for every stitch I sew. I'm knitting today. She's knitting, doing needlework. And he says, my daughter, that's a lot for a little. And she has these great conversations back and forth with him. It's beautiful. And she says, yes, Lord, I know it's not much, but I'm not able to do great penances because you put me here. This is all I can give. And, you did spend much of your life doing humble service, and that was an act of saving and salvation, the oxio et passio, the actions and the passions of Christ, the whole life. So I don't think it's too little if it's done with great love. And he says, all right, yes, my daughter, I will do that. And so she just stitches away. I love that image of one, the kind of the back and forth. So it's a sort of Jesuit model, right? I'm obedient, but I'm also going to argue with you a bit because she loved. They're friends. They're friends, so they can talk back and forth. But two, the great trust in and realization that it is in the act. It's the love that matters in these acts, and that he can use even the littlest thing if we intend it and to offer to him as helping bring graces to other people. And we just don't always think about that. So I love that perhaps is my favorite quote passage in there is the fight over needle stitching.
Fantastic. Well, I can honestly say that I haven't done that lately with the Lord. I've fought with him over my needlework.
Yeah, that's probably for the best.
But it is inspiring, right? All of us have these conversations with God, right? Where we tell him what really is on our hearts, and to hear Faustina's experience of that kind of confirmation from him is absolutely encouraging.
Yes.
Well, thanks everyone for listening to this episode of Godsplaining. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. If you'd like to donate to the podcast through Patreon, follow the link in the description. You can also follow the links in the description to shop Godsplaining merch and to get information on upcoming Godsplaining events. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. Know of our prayers for you, and we ask that you would pray for us. God bless.